Dear friends, a lifetime of love. That is the most precious gift that each of us can give to life. In the hustle and bustle of life, there are times when we forget that the most beautiful thing is not the great things we achieve, but the small loves we share every day. Who would have thought a girl barely out of her teens would stand beneath a lavish canopy of roses and silk, holding hands with a man 3 times her age, smiling through tears as cameras flashed and strangers clapped? Her name was Liana, just 20, bright, soft-spoken, with eyes that held dreams bigger than her hometown could contain. She had always been different, drawn to classical music instead of pop, old books instead of parties. So when she told her friends she was marrying a 62-year-old businessman she met through a charity fundraiser, they laughed. Then they cried. Then they stopped calling. She met Richard Whitmore on a night that smelled like winter. Snow fell outside the banquet hall, but inside, chandeliers burned warm and golden. He wore a navy suit with a silk handkerchief, his hair perfectly silver, his voice smooth like jazz. There was something disarming about his calmness, like time bent for him, like he had no need to rush or impress. And maybe that's what drew Liana in, his complete opposite nature. He listened, really listened. Her stories, her fears, even the part where she confessed she felt like she was born in the wrong decade. He chuckled and told her he'd felt the same 50 years ago. Their courtship was swift but surreal. Lavish dates in candlelit restaurants, weekend getaways to old chateaus, gifts wrapped in velvet and sealed with gold. It didn't feel like love. It felt like fantasy, a movie script written just for her. And when he proposed, on a private balcony in Santorini, the sun setting behind him like a painting, she said yes, because why not? He made her feel seen, cherished, protected. And besides, he was a widower, she reasoned. He'd lived through tragedy, raised 2 daughters who now lived abroad. He deserved happiness too. But fairy tales rot fast when built on secrets. It started the night of their wedding. A storm had rolled in, shaking the stained glass windows of the cathedral as if protesting the vows being exchanged. Liana, dressed in ivory lace, stood beside Richard as the priest recited blessings. The guests, mostly his business partners and distant relatives, smiled politely. But in the back pew, a woman in black sat alone, face hidden beneath the netted veil. Liana noticed her only once, and for a second, their eyes met. A chill crawled down her spine. Something about that gaze, it wasn't sadness. It was fury. Caged, trembling fury. After the ceremony, during the reception at a rented vineyard, the woman disappeared. Liana asked Richard who she was. He tightened his jaw and muttered, "Just an old associate. Forget her." But Liana couldn't. Their honeymoon was in Tuscany. Olive groves, wine-stained lips, moonlight dances. Everything she had ever wanted. Yet, Richard began to change. Not in ways she could explain at first, just small things. He began locking certain rooms in the villa. He took phone calls in the middle of the night, his voice sharp and low. He snapped at her once, then apologized with a diamond necklace. The charm faded. The mystery soured. One morning, Liana found a box beneath their bed. Not hidden well, just placed as if forgotten. Inside were photographs, old, some faded, some burned at the corners. A woman, young, beautiful, pale blonde like Liana, with haunting eyes. In every photo, she stood beside Richard, not smiling, not holding him, just there, staring. She brought the box to him that night. His reaction wasn't shock, it was silence. And then rage. He snatched the photos, threw them into the fireplace, and told her never to go through his things again. The next day, he booked her a spa retreat alone, told her she needed rest. "You're overthinking. Adjusting to marriage can be stressful." She went, but she didn't relax. She researched, and that's when she found the first article. A headline buried in archives. Local woman dies in fire. Husband unharmed. The photo was the same woman. Her name was Catherine Whitmore, Richard's first wife. Not the one she thought had died peacefully in her sleep 10 years ago. This was different. Catherine had died young, trapped in a summer home fire. Richard had survived, declared a hero even. No charges filed. Liana's heart thundered. She kept digging. 3 years later, another article. Different town. Another woman. Another fire. No charges. Different alias. It didn't make sense. Was she being paranoid? Could she trust what she saw? Back home, she confronted him gently. But Richard's reaction was ice. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. He simply said, "You should have left it alone." And for the first time, she feared him. The mansion felt like a cage after that. The staff no longer smiled at her. Cameras appeared in corners she hadn't noticed before. Her phone started glitching, messages never delivered. She tried to leave once, but the car wouldn't start. The driver said, "Mr. Whitmore said no trips today." She realized then, she was a prisoner. But why? What was he hiding that was worth this? One stormy night, she escaped. Through a service tunnel the maid once mentioned in passing. She ran barefoot through mud and trees until she reached a neighbor's estate, banging on the door like a madwoman. The woman who opened the door was the same one from the wedding, the black veil. But now she wasn't veiled. Her name was Julia, Catherine's sister, and what she told Liana broke her. Richard Whitmore wasn't just a widower. He was a predator, a man who married women young, with a certain look, a certain vulnerability. And when they became too curious, too difficult, too alive, he made them disappear. Fire, drowning, suicide, always clean, always tragic, never traced. Julia had tried for years to gather proof. But Richard had money, power, connections. Every attempt got swept away. So she waited for the next girl. And when she saw Liana, she saw her sister's ghost. They went to the police. But without direct evidence, they were turned away. So they built a case, quietly. They hacked, they tracked, they risked everything. And what they found would shock the world. Among the encrypted files, buried behind layers of fake names and dummy accounts, they found something far more disturbing than Julia had ever imagined. Documents, records, old letters, birth certificates, DNA results, patterns that connected not just women, but children. Children who had disappeared, born in secret, sent away, paid off, and one name, buried in a sealed file, sent ice through Liana's veins, her own. Her full name, birth date, blood type, listed under Subject 11. The file linked her not to Richard as his wife, but as his sibling, half-sibling. The photos, the chilling familiarity, the way he always said, "You remind me of someone." It wasn't just romantic nonsense. It was true. Richard hadn't married a stranger. He had married his sister, and their parents had known. Liana stared at the screen, breath caught in her throat, as the truth crushed every illusion she'd clung to. Her hands trembled. Her skin burned with a shame that wasn't hers to carry. She backed away from the computer like it might explode, like it might scream her secret into the walls. But the only sound in Julia's office was the faint hum of a heater and the desperate pounding of Liana's heart. Julia stood frozen too, mouth ajar, as if the horror had finally crested past even her darkest suspicions. He knew. Liana whispered. He always knew. And then the next thought hit. What did he want? Because Richard wasn't reckless. He wasn't stupid. He had planned every step of this twisted life with precision, which meant marrying Liana wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Julia's voice broke through the silence. "We have to get out. This changes everything." They moved quickly after that. Copies were made. Backups. A USB drive hidden in a box of cereal. Another tape beneath Julia's toilet tank. They didn't sleep. They didn't eat. They didn't trust anyone. By dawn, they were on the road, driving toward the only journalist who had ever dared publish a piece against Richard Whitmore, a woman named Dana Roth. She had lost her job, her reputation, but not her fire. She met them in a diner off Highway 12, her eyes guarded but curious. When she saw the files, her jaw tightened. When she read the names, she crossed herself. But when she reached Liana's record, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I think you were always part of his plan." "What do you mean?" Liana's voice cracked. Dana hesitated, then pointed to one of the birth records. This wasn't just a fling between your mother and his father. Look at the timestamp. The location. Your mother gave birth at a private facility owned by Whitmore Industries. All the nurses on file. Fake names. The doctor disappeared in 2006. Liana, I don't think your mother ever chose to be with him. Julia gasped. The weight of it all settled on Liana's shoulders like a mountain. Her life had never been her own. She had been bred, controlled, lied to, and now married to a man who was not only her half-brother, but possibly the architect of her very existence. The next steps moved fast. Dana pitched the story to 3 international outlets, offshore, untouchable by Whitmore's influence. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded. Billionaire linked to decades of missing women and children. Subject 11 speaks out. Inside the secret life of Richard Whitmore. DNA files reveal incestuous marriage hidden by power and money. The fallout was immediate. Richard vanished. His estate was raided. Staff questioned. Servers seized. Offshore accounts frozen. But the man himself? Gone. No flights. No sightings. Just gone. And then the letters started arriving. Handwritten. Always addressed to Liana. No return address. No fingerprints. Just messages in elegant script. You were the only one who saw me. They never understood us. They'll twist our story, but you know the truth. Come home. I forgive you. She burned every letter. Except one. Because deep down, a part of her still needed to believe she was more than a pawn. That some fragment of what she'd felt, under candlelight, in vineyards, in whispered conversations about books and forgotten decades, had been real. But she knew better now. Some monsters don't wear masks. They wear tuxedos. They bring you roses. They listen. And they destroy you with the gentlest hands. 1 year later, Liana stood before a crowd at a survivors' conference, dressed in a navy blouse that didn't belong to wealth or trauma, but to her. She took the mic with steady fingers, looked out into the sea of wounded warriors and silent fighters, and told her story. Not the fairy tale. Not the horror. Just the truth. She ended with one sentence, soft but clear. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming who you were before they broke you. The audience stood. She smiled. Somewhere, Richard might still be watching. But for the first time, Liana didn't care. She was no longer afraid. She was free.